going to be very much useful to you for your GRE preparation, GRE verbal preparation. I'd like to introduce you to the presenter today. Today's presenter is Anuja. She is from Stella Maris College, and she has an MPhil in English literature. She has a great experience in training students in the verbal section. So she is a verbal expert here. Today's session will be handled by her. Over to you, Anuja.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar on the tips and tricks to techniques to crack discrete type questions in the GRE verbal. So I'd like to say at the outset that some of the techniques that we're going to discuss here today is going to be useful for anyone when it comes to solving these question types, no matter where you are in your GRE preparation journey. Even if you're nearing the end of it or you're just beginning, it's a great time for you to review your strategies and proceed with these techniques. So without further ado, we'll get started. So a quick revision of the question types on the verbal part of the GRE. We have 3 types of questions for those of you who are unfamiliar: text completion or TC questions, sentence equivalence or SE questions for short, and reading comprehension or RC questions for short. Now, all of these are the different question types you would encounter in the verbal section of the GRE. In average GRE, you would have at least 2, if not 3 verbal sections. So we call the text completion and sentence equivalence questions collectively as discrete questions. And those are the types we're going to be dealing with today. So just to give you an idea of exactly how important the TC and SE questions are in terms of how it's going to reflect on your verbal score, you would notice that there are 3 types of TC questions. Well, there's the kind with 1 blank, there's the kind with 2 blanks, and the kind with 3 blanks. On top of that, you also have sentence equivalence question types where there's only 1 blank, and you would have to come up with 2 correct answer options for that blank. Now, sentence equivalence, this is a type that you really have to pay attention for, that you need to take very seriously, because just this one question type can account for 20% of your verbal reasoning questions on the GRE. So it is a pretty heavy portion that you're looking at right now, nearly half the verbal section of your GRE. So keeping that in mind, let's take a look at why discrete questions are important and what it is that you need to focus on to do well on these types. Now, put together, as I mentioned earlier, sentence equivalence and text completion questions form around half of all of the verbal section questions on the GRE. However, the good thing is that compared to RCs, where you have to like plow through this long or difficult passage and then answer questions, these can be answered much faster because they're usually only anywhere between 1 and 3 sentences long. So answering them quickly helps you boost your score quickly as well. And this is something that you'll need to work on to improve your time management skills. But this is the main idea of why you should answer discrete questions, take them seriously, and help boost your verbal score. The one thing about discrete questions, though, the trick is that they do require a stronger vocabulary from you guys. So compared to RCs, not that RCs don't have tough vocabulary, they do, but the vocabulary, the intensity of what you're going to see on the discrete questions is something else. That said, for those of you who are worried about the old vocabulary lists from Barron's with 3,000 words, it's not so vocab intensive. The GRE isn't as vocab intensive as it used to be, say, a couple decades ago, but all the same, you need to take this seriously and keep working on this. So a tip from our end, pick up as many techniques as you can. If you missed last week's, a couple weeks ago, our webinar on building vocabulary, you can check that out online. And of course, find some apps that'll help you pick up words for your exam. It's always helpful to keep working on vocabulary till the end, okay? Now, before we look at actual questions, I'm going to share with you the strategy that we recommend for solving all discrete type questions for the GRE. This is a blanket strategy. You can apply it for all of the discrete types, whether it's 1 blank or 2 blanks or 3 blanks, or even if it's an SE type. So it all starts with you reading a question carefully. When I say reading it carefully, we mean reading it slowly, patiently absorbing every word of the question. Please do not skip even one word of this question. Anytime you see one, you shouldn't be skimming. You shouldn't rush to try to answer it just because you need to answer it quickly. Take every word seriously, because after all, that is the only clue you have to figuring out the answer. And any one of those words, it could be as small as a yet or a but, and it can be as small as a comma that could change what you're reading. So please take the question seriously, every word of the question seriously, and read carefully. When you're doing this, if you find some difficulty, we always recommend that students split sentences into smaller chunks or clauses that help you understand those sentences little by little until you piece everything together like a puzzle. So this is step 2 of the recommended strategy. Moving on to step 3, now this is where things get really tricky and important. You need to start taking, why we said you need to take every word seriously is because there are key words embedded in every one of these questions. Key words, phrases, these are going to give you information about what should fill the blank. Obviously, they're not going to give you a question and ask you about what's going to fill the blank without giving you some hint at how to fill it. So what you need to do in step 3 is identify those key words, the phrases that bring out meaning in the sentence that suggest what you could fill the blank with. So once you have identified those keywords, phrases, and clues, you move on to step 4, where you come up with your own word to fill that blank. Now, if you've understood what the keywords and phrases are saying, if you've made sense of the sentence, then you follow it through to its logical end, and you would be able to fill up the blank with something. You would have some idea of what you need to complete it with. That's the point of step 3, to get an idea of how to fill in the blank. And in step 4, you actually come up with something to fill in the blank. A lot of people we've recommended this strategy to, initially, they resist step 4, they try to skip step 4, they go directly into the answer options, and they fall for traps. I'm not telling you this because we want to just encourage spending time on this unnecessarily. We're telling you this from serious experience with lots and lots of GRE aspirants and study abroad aspirants. Skipping this step, we've noticed, inevitably leads them to choosing trap answer choices that do not have the support in the question or the clue or the key words to support them as the right answer. So completing step 4 would help you arrive more specifically at what should fill the blank. So when you proceed to step 5 and look at the answer options, you can use the process of elimination. So you would just not select the answer options that don't align with what you've come up with based on the keywords and strategies. Now what you can do is eliminate based on what you came up with. If it's not a match, that's not the answer. Keep going until you find the answer that is a match. If you find 2 answer options that could be a match, that means you've missed something in step 3. So any confusion in step 5 should take you back to step 3 and see, what did I miss? Where was a key word that told me more specifically what the right answer should be? So always go back to step 3 if you're stuck at step 5. It's only after you have arrived at one answer choice for that blank that you should plug it back into the sentence and see if it's a fit. A lot of people in step 6, what they do is they see that, hey, maybe this isn't a match, and then they decide, I'm going to start plugging in all the answer choices to see if it works. This is a waste of time. Please do not fall for that either. Again, if something doesn't work in step 6, that's why we have step 6. So you can go back to step 3 and rework what you've missed. Figure out what keyword you've missed here. So make sure you follow the order of these steps and don't skip any of them, because otherwise it's going to lead to confusion. Discrete questions, being short and relatively easy to solve for people with good vocabulary, can lead a lot of people into just selecting answer options without thinking twice. That's why we recommend taking it step by step and following a fail-safe process. If you identify those keywords, it will lead you to what you need to fill the blank with. It's important that you do not read the answer choices until step 5. If you read them beforehand, they will confuse you. They will affect how you have read the sentence. Please don't read answer choices until step 5. ETS has taken a lot of effort to come up with these questions and answer choices, and every GRE has unscored sections in which they test all kinds of new questions. They take back all of this data and they use the data on the answer choices to throw at you the ones that students most frequently fall for. So they are expecting you to fall for those traps. You need to not fall for them. You need to not read the answer choices until you know how to fill the blank. So please avoid doing this. Look for the clues in the question and then proceed. I'm going to stay here for a few seconds for those of you who just want to take these steps in and be a little careful. Remember, step 1, read the question carefully. Step 2, split it into chunks if you need help. Step 3, identify keywords and clues. Step 4, come up with your own word or phrase. It's totally okay if you do this in your mother tongue, in your own language, whatever it may be. You just need to have a clear idea of how to fill the blank. Because for step 5, you can't proceed via elimination without having an idea first. And then step 6, just to check your answers. Just like in math, just like for quant, you always have to check your answers. Okay? Remember, verbal reasoning is what they call this section on the GRE. It's not just about your English skills, it's about your reasoning skills. So the logic is there if you can find it. All right? So if you've got the strategy in place, we're going to move on to the first of the text completion question types. That is the TC1, where you have one blank in the question. So let's take a look at one sample TC1 question. This is what it looks like, and we're gonna solve this question using this strategy. Okay? A typical TC1 question would look like this. There would be one sentence, 5 answer choices. But remember, you're not supposed to look at the answer choices. So we're gonna isolate it. We're going to look at just the question. We're going to start by reading it carefully. Step 1, step by step. Let's take this nice and easy. Let's read the question carefully, identify those clues, and then proceed to the answer choices. Some aquarium fish seldom benefit from the blank of human involvement, since, left to themselves, they're ill-equipped to survive. So for those of you who find that there are a lot of different chunks and it's hard to follow, remember, you can always split it into smaller pieces. So let's try that. Let's just split it into smaller pieces. Some aquarium fish seldom benefit from the blank of human involvement. Okay, we've got some meaning here. We'll just stop it there, and then we'll continue with the second part here. Since, left to themselves, they are ill-equipped to survive. Just break it down, and let's take a closer look at what we mean here. We've got something going on about some aquarium fish. So this is fish. There are a bunch of fish that live in an aquarium. They seldom benefit from something regarding human involvement. So when we say seldom benefit, you have to know that it means rarely or almost never at all. So it's important that you spot words like that hint at how often something happens. So we got aquarium fish that rarely benefit from something regarding human involvement. Now, do we really know anything much about the human involvement or the fish yet? Not really. We don't have enough evidence to fill the blank. So let's keep reading. Let's understand what the rest of the sentence is saying and see what we're missing. Since, left to themselves, they're ill-equipped to survive. Okay? Since is like another word for because. So we're looking at reason. And left to themselves. Who do we mean by themselves? Well, the only plural noun we've seen earlier is what's going to be fish. So obviously the themselves has to point back to the fish. So left to themselves, the fish, they, again the fish, are ill-equipped to survive. So what do you mean by ill-equipped? It means you don't have the equipment to do something. You don't have what it takes to do something. So when they're left by themselves, the fish are not equipped to survive. All right, so this is the meaning we've got from the sentence, right? So we've got fish, they don't benefit from something about human involvement because when they're alone, they don't have what it takes to survive. So based on this, let's take a closer look at what could be the hints, the clue words here. We know there's fish in human involvement. That's the basic context. We know that they rarely benefit. It's not like they benefit all the time. It's almost never that they benefit. And there's since, which tells us reason. So these are the kinds of clue words you need to look out for. Usually in a TC or an SE question, the second part of the sentence, say the blank is in the first part, the second part would give you some idea, some information about how you should fill that first blank. And in the second part, we're getting a reason here. That reason is clearly an explanation for what's stated in the first part, right? So the reason is that if they're alone, they can't survive. If they're alone and they can't survive, then what does human involvement do? If they're alone, they can't survive. So human involvement has to, in some way, help them. So they can't benefit from the what of human involvement if being alone means they don't survive. So we're looking for what kind of word? What is the next step? Once you've identified the meaning of the sentence, you have to come up with your own word or phrase for the blank. We understand that they can't survive on their own, which means human involvement is actually a good thing. So what would they not benefit from with regards to human involvement? If human involvement is good, then maybe they don't benefit from the removal of human involvement. So if human involvement suddenly stopped, then they're not going to survive. So here's what we have. They're not going to benefit from the removal of human involvement because if they're alone, they won't survive. This is how you can come up with your own word or phrase for the blank. As we said, it can be something really simple, something really brief, something that basically covers what you want to say, even if it's in your own language. So now that we've got our own word or phrase and we're very clear about the meaning of the sentence, let's move on and take a look at the answer choices so we can eliminate them. Remember, we came up with something like removal. All right, let's take a look at the answer options. Remember, process of elimination, not selection. Let's go one by one. What does imposition mean? Well, to impose means to do something forcefully, right? Out of force. Is there anything about imposing human involvement? Actually, that would bring out the wrong meaning. So we can eliminate that option. Absence? We're talking about removal. So absence seems to make some sense. Ramification. Ramification has to do with consequences, right? Is that got anything to do with the removal or the absence of human involvement? Nope, easily eliminated. Diligence means to keep working hard on something. Continuance means to have something keep going. These are the opposite of what we came up with when we're talking about removal. So the best fit here is clearly absence based on elimination. So at this point, in step 6, all we do is we take the answer we identified, plug it back in, and see if it reads okay. Some aquarium fish seldom benefit from the absence of human involvement since, left to themselves, they're ill-equipped to survive. This seems to bring out the meaning that this sentence makes, so you can proceed to the next question. Now, a lot of you may feel that you could still arrive at the right answer choice without following all these steps, but the reason we tell you to avoid that is because some of these answer choices may still seem tempting or trap answers if you put them back in without proceeding by understanding what the sentence says. For instance, it's almost an assumption, a natural assumption we make these days that human involvement is bad for the environment or anything related to the environment. So we don't really think about what the sentence is trying to say. We bring in our own assumptions. So we think human involvement is bad and therefore they won't benefit from the imposition of human involvement or the ramifications of human involvement. Okay, that usually there are bad consequences, right? We bring in that assumption and we fall for a trap, which is why we recommend following these steps. So if you're clear on the steps, let's take a quick look at one more TC1 question to make sure you're comfortable. So we have a typical question here. Again, one sentence, one blank, 5 answer choices. We're going to hide the answer choices so we don't fall for any tempting ones. And we're going to look at just the question. Okay, so let's see what we have in the question. We've got to read carefully and not miss a single word. In parts of the Arctic, the land grades into the landfast ice so blank that you can walk off the coast and not know you're over the hidden sea. All right, let's take it a little slowly. Take a look, understand what the sentence is saying. So we have something happening in some parts of the Arctic. The land grades into landfast ice. So when we say grades, we mean something gradually going from one level to another, like she moved from grade 3 to grade 4. So the land is gradually turning into ice. So blank that you can walk off the coast and not know you're over the hidden sea. So when we come to the sentence, we understand that there's some land, it's gradually becoming ice, and it's happening in such a manner that you could walk off the coast without even knowing there's a sea under you. So you'd be walking, moseying along, and bam, you're over the sea and you have no clue. That's what the sentence is saying. Remember, the second part of the sentence is going to give us the clue for this blank because that's where most of the information is. We just know that the land grades into ice here. Here's where you know that when you walk off the coast, you don't know you're over the hidden sea. That's the hint. That's the extra information that's going to tell you how to fill the blank. It's very important that you remember this because no correct answer choice won't have some support in the question like this. There would be some clue, some hint that it's supported by. So if you can walk off and not know you're over the hidden sea, what does that mean? That means that the land grades into the ice in such a way that you're not aware that it's happening. So maybe what do? We come up with our own word or phrase for the blank at this point. Remember, the step after you identify all of these clues is to come up with your own word or phrase. So in what way is this happening? It's happening in a way that you don't know that you're over the hidden sea. So maybe it's not obvious, it's not noticeable. So you can go for a word maybe like unnoticeably. That could be the kind of word you fill up the blank with. It can be something simple. You can just convert it into the right part of speech for the blank. Even if you don't do that conversion, it's fine. Maybe you just say it's not obvious. It's not evident. Or it's not seen. Right? Some phrase is enough as long as you have an idea of how to fill the blank. Do not skip this step because when we proceed to elimination, it might get a little harder. All right, so let's take a look at the answer options, keeping our options for the blank, keeping our word for the blank in mind. Shall we read the answer options? A, permanently. Permanently means something that stays for good. It's completely irrelevant. It has nothing to do with noticing or not noticing something, so we can eliminate it. Imperceptibly, imperceptible. Perceiving is to be able to see or feel or sense something. Imperceptibly is the negative form, so something that can't be sensed or seen. So we're looking at something that's not noticeable, imperceptible. It may be a decent fit. But even if you've decided on this, we need to look at the other choices just in case there may be a better fit. So let's take a look at those and come back to this. Irregularly, we're talking about something that's not noticeable, not something that's irregular. It's pretty irrelevant when you know that this is the clue word and it's not at all hinting at something being irregular, just something not seen. So we can eliminate this because it's irrelevant. Precariously. Now, for those of you who may not have worked on your vocabulary prep or haven't encountered this word before, precarious means something that's balanced in a dangerous way. It's in a dangerous position, like it's going to give any minute. Say, have you ever seen a cat, say, walking on a branch of a tree or something? You feel like you could fall any minute. Or if you've ever seen people walking the tightrope, it's when they tie like one end of a rope to one building and pull it to the other side. And they actually walk on that rope across to the building. And when we watch them do it, we're amazed because if we were up there, we would be balanced very precariously and it would look like we could fall any minute. So precarious means something positioned in a dangerous kind of way. It has nothing to do with not noticing, so we can eliminate that too. What about slightly? Well, slightly would have been the tempting option if you had not come up with something here based on your clue. If you'd missed this step, so you may wonder, okay, so what's wrong with slightly? What's wrong with slightly is that it's not really supported by this question. We have no clue here suggesting that it happened slightly. Slightly may not mean that you don't know that you're over the hidden sea. On the other hand, imperceptibly would mean that you don't know. It's not noticeable. So we can eliminate this answer option. And we can safely say that B is correct because we were able to eliminate all of the other options, and this one was a good fit for what we came up with. So in the final part, remember the last step is to plug it back in and read the sentence as a whole to see if it makes sense. In parts of the Arctic, the land grades into the landfast ice so imperceptibly that you can walk off the coast and not know you're over the hidden sea. Seems to make complete logical sense, so we can keep going. Great. Okay, so that's some practice for you guys for TC1s. I hope that gives you a strategy that you would take forward and continue to use for solving all of the text completion types. Sentence equivalents are slightly trickier question types than the text completion. Text completion is straightforward because there's some clues, there's one or two blanks, and it's a pretty direct correlation. So what's tricky about sentence equivalents? Why do they have such a fancy name? Let's take a look. What are you expected to do with sentence equivalence questions? Well, the trick with sentence equivalence is that you'll be given one sentence. Yes, that's just one sentence, never any longer than a sentence, with one blank and a set of 6 words as your answer choices. So for those of you who were paying attention, you would have remembered that text completion questions with one blank have 5 answer choices, whereas SE questions would have 6 answer choices. This is the easiest way to differentiate between the two types. Now, of these 6 words, what you have to do is select 2 words from the answer choices. Here's a trick. When you plug those 2 words back into the sentence, not at the same time, mind you, individually, when you plug them back in, they would produce sentences that are similar in meaning. Note the difference between the word similar and the word same. There is a difference. Same means the exact of the same kind type. Similar, on the other hand, sort of kind of like the other one. So what you have to do in sentence equivalence is of 6, you need to pick 2 choices. No more, no less. Again, we have seen a lot of GRE aspirants picking less than 2 options for SE question types because they're not used to them. Please read your instructions carefully. If you get confused, look out for 6 options. And if you're still confused, you would get little check boxes next to these because there are multiple answer question types, not just one correct answer, but 2. Do not make that silly mistake. You want to select 2 choices. Now, also keep in mind, there's no partial credit in the GRE for anything. So if you get a question wrong, say in a text completion with 3 blanks, if you miss 1 blank, you're going to lose points for the entire question. The same applies to sentence equivalence question types. Getting one of the two options correct and missing the other one means you lose the point. Now this is even sillier with SE question types because getting one of them right means you understood the meaning of the sentence and you managed to pick the other one. I don't know, maybe you didn't recognize the word or maybe it was a tricky answer choice, but you were so close and you lost that point. So avoid making this mistake when it comes to SE questions. Make sure you get the 2 answer choices that bring out similar meanings in the question. Now, I know explaining all of this without looking at actual questions may make it a little difficult to imagine. So let's take a look at some actual questions to see what we need to do. Now, remember, SE questions are short. You need to be able to answer them in 20 to 40 seconds and move on to the next question. However, they do demand a lot from your vocabulary, more than the text completion question types, because you need to be able to identify words and their nuanced meanings that seem to have similar meanings in specific contexts. So when you're learning those words for your GRE, don't just learn the meaning. Look at some contexts, read some sample sentences, get an idea of where those words are actually used, what words are similar to them. Pick up some synonyms, learn the antonyms, make it a complete learning. That's what this question type is testing you on. Is your understanding of nuances complete? That's how you'll be able to identify the 2 correct answers. Now, you can expect around 4 SE questions on one verbal section of the GRE. Like we said earlier, it's like 1/5 of all your verbal questions. And in one GRE, anywhere between 8 and 10 SE questions can be easily expected. So be ready for this question type. Do not take them lightly just because they're only one sentence. All right? Now let's take a look at a sample SE question. Before we move on, I just want to remind everybody that when you're working on your time management, you want to be able to, after a lot of practice, it's okay if you can't do this right away, but eventually you want to be able to solve all of the easier discrete questions in about 30 to 45 seconds, right? So TC1s, SEs, and TC2s, somewhere in this comfortable zone. Maybe TC2s a little bit longer would be okay. TC3s are pretty tough beast to crack, so they take a little bit more time, but this is where you want to be when you're ready for your GRE. So if you're not there yet, try to first work on your accuracy and then improve your time management. Now let's take a look at a sample SE question. This is what it would look like. Remember, 2 correct answer choices that fit the meaning of the sentence as a whole, and they have to be alike in meaning. All right, this is what the question would look like. Again, like we said, not 5 answer choices, but 6 answer choices. Again, to reiterate the strategy, you need to not look at the answer choices. They're even more confusing with SE questions because there's more and they're all meant to trap you. All right, so what you need to do is come up with your own word or phrase based on the clues without looking at the choices. Let's look at the sentence. Again, it's only one sentence. It may look long because it's 4 lines here and it's a bigger font. It's only one sentence, do not fear. Under ethical guidelines adopted by the State Health Council more than a decade ago, human genes were to be manipulated only to correct diseases for which blank treatments were unsatisfactory. All right, so if you remember this strategy, we're supposed to read carefully, understand every word. If you need to, break it down into chunks. So let's just break it down into chunks and see what the sentence is trying to tell us. Under ethical guidelines adopted by the State Health Council. Okay, so there's a State Health Council. We can understand that there's some body that determines what's good for health for a particular state. And there are ethical guidelines. So what do we mean by ethical guidelines? Guides, some kind of rule, some group of rules that tell you what's proper and ethical behavior, moral behavior. And the State Health Council has adopted these guidelines. Okay, and that's happened more than a decade ago. A decade is 10 years, right? So these guidelines have been adopted by the council over 10 years ago. What about them? Human genes were to be manipulated only to correct diseases for which blank treatments are unsatisfactory. So we're talking about human genes being manipulated. So gene manipulation only to correct diseases for which blank treatments were unsatisfactory. So this gene manipulation needs to happen only in some specific cases. For diseases for which some kinds of treatments proved unsatisfactory. So these other treatments were not okay, were not enough, or did not do what they needed to do. And that's why we had to resort to gene manipulation. So based on this, we've understood what the sentence is trying to say. We know what the context is. There's human genes being manipulated only for some diseases. Some treatments were unsatisfactory. These were all the clues. Now, what kind of treatments could they be? Now, because we have this phrase here, only for something, it means it's a last resort of sorts, right? It's not for any case but this case. It's not okay in any other case. And we know the other treatments were unsatisfactory. So what kind of other treatments? If it's only the last resort, then maybe all other treatments. That is what only suggests. It's only one case where it's okay. The case where all other treatments, so maybe that's what you're looking for, a word that means all other treatments or existing treatments, maybe other option treatments. Those are the kind of words you're trying to fill the blank with. So, well, maybe we can have something that means other options. Something simple is more than enough. It's okay if it's 2 or 3 words, as long as you've got it, you've arrived at it based on the clues, and not by just looking at the answer choices and leaping to conclusions. So let's see, have we got a full idea of the question? We've got all other options that are not okay, they were not satisfactory, so we have this final resort, gene manipulation. Let's take a look at the answer options and see if we can eliminate anything based on what we came up with. Okay, really quickly, I'm just going to put in all other options. something like that here, so we can eliminate. Okay, the first option, rare. There's no clue for rare. We came up with all other possibilities. Rare doesn't mean all other possibilities. It means only some. Easily eliminated. Most, no, we know that it's a last resort. We have that clue, so we know most is not okay either. Risky, again, only talks about some particular treatments, not all possible treatments when you're talking about a last resort. Again, can be eliminated. Uncommon, obviously, since we're looking at all options, not just uncommon ones, we can eliminate that too. Alternative. Alternative means, okay, your other options when it comes to something. So alternative could be a correct answer. And the last option is conventional. Conventional means anything that's followed in general, whatever everybody goes with, right? That's what we mean by conventions, what everybody follows. So that could also be a correct option. So when we plug in alternative, that seems like a perfect fit. That's what we came up with too, every other option. What about conventional? Well, conventional treatments also suggests all of the treatments that everybody's already following. It's not the last resort, it's the common resort. So it would also be a pretty good fit to suggest all the treatments that already exist. When you plug it back into the sentence, both of these would bring out similar meanings in the sense that all other possible treatments that are generally followed don't work, therefore we have to resort to gene manipulation. You can easily see how none of these other options present that meaning at all or even come close. Now, the reason we wanted to share this question with you was to show you how synonyms are not the way to go when it comes to SE question types. Remember, that's why I emphasize the difference between same versus similar. They're looking for similar, not the exact same, right? Even synonyms, of course, are usually only similar, but you don't want to easily fall for that trap because they're going to set up pairs of synonyms in the answer options for you to make it difficult. So don't just look for pairs of synonyms. Look for the thing that covers your meaning and that seems to bring out similar meanings in the actual sentence. Do not fall for synonyms. That being said, there's always the chance that the correct answers for SE questions may be synonyms after all. So work on your vocabulary. It will be tough for you to identify the right answer choices based on this. So you need to make sure that you develop your vocabulary so you can eliminate options easily for all of the discrete question types. As you see, the number of answer options only builds as we look at the harder types. TC2s have 6 options, TC3s have 9 options. So you need to work on your vocabulary to eliminate. So that being said, I hope this gives you an idea of how you can use this strategy to easily eliminate options and arrive at accurate answer options for the discrete question types.
All right. Thank you for joining us, guys. Have a great day. Thank you.